The Philadelphia Eagles offense struggled a lot against the blitz in 2023 with a new offensive coordinator and play caller in Kellen Moore. How are they going to attack that issue? All that and more coming your way on this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome into this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm one of your two hosts, Louie DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. We're brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. The Philadelphia Eagles 2024 training camp is underway. Day 3 was today. Gino, no media availability, though. It was a closed walkthrough at the NovaCare complex. So no camp practice to update the people on. No CB2 updates for the depth chart and no more pre-snap motion. But we are in segment 2 because of all this new creativity in the Eagles offense. We're actually going to drop some of our own pre-snap motion Kellen Moore like plays for the audience. So that'll be fun. But before we do get into that, we have been listening to all these beat reporters the last few days say how more creative and multiple this offense looks with Kellen Moore, how there is so much more motion. Dallas Goedert talked about it, Devontae Smith. Everybody's saying Jalen Hurts looks very in control of this unit. And one area of this offense that I think this new look, this new style, where it's going to help a major issue from last year is against the blitz, because this has really been like a recurring issue throughout the Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts era. And probably a lot of it is because of how basic and vanilla this offense was pre-snap. But you look at, and because Jalen Hurts wasn't a developed passer for a bit, like 2021, it was a huge problem. The first half of 2022, I thought they got a lot better at attacking the blitz in the second half of 2022. But then last year, yet again, with Brian Johnson as the play caller, it was bad again. I think, Gino, like when you look at the pre-snap motion, when you look at what Kellen Moore is going to do with hot reads, and even Jalen Hurts showing more of a motivation to check the football down and stay in the pocket, I really do think that's going to help attack the blitz this year. And that was a huge issue. Like you look at the playoff game against Tampa, they killed this team with Todd Bowles just sending out an all-out blitz almost every single passing down.
One of the saddest things last year was turning on JT O'Sullivan's breakdown of the quarterback play from the Philadelphia Eagles and saying every single week, I don't know if this offense doesn't have answers to the hot, but they're just not throwing it to the hot.
Yeah, we heard that for years, and last year was no different.
It felt like the lack of pre-snap motion, for one, made it easy for defenses to diagnose exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles were going to do, which allowed them to just put their foot in the dirt, get after Jalen Hurts, make it difficult. 2, it allowed defensive coordinators to have a much easier time game planning for the Philadelphia Eagles. If you look at the game plan of what Tampa did in the playoffs, it was bread and butter, exactly how you attack the Eagles. You go cover 0, you blitz them to death because they didn't have any answers. But now, with that motion element to this Kellen Moore-based offense, you're going to have to believe that he is going to take advantage of matchups, take advantage of space, that when there is this situation where, let's say, they're on the left hash and they kind of condense the set a little closer to the boundary, and they know that that cornerback, that nickel corner, is probably going to blitz us.
Yeah.
They got to either, one, get that probably your slot wide receiver, whoever that is, either Paris Campbell or if AJ Brown, whoever's lining up there, you either got to put him in motion to check out of that play because you know that that guy is going to blitz you, or you have a very good answer to the hot, and he just goes, runs a little hitch, sits in space right behind, gets in front of the overhang defender, and Jalen Hurts knows exactly where his hots are going to be every week. But the worst thing that they can do is do exactly what they did last year, which was nothing. Because against hot reads, against the blitz, they're giving you essentially free space to take. I am vacating this area, and if you can recognize that,
Yeah,
Big
it's
chunk plays.
3 yards every time if you recognize it, and that's the other thing you mentioned, like pre-snap motion, how that's going to help in this way because defenses knew what was coming, and then they could be like, oh, let's send the blitz. They're running vertical routes, like all 4 receivers, like we know what this is. But that's the problem too. It's what the Eagles were calling post-snap. It was just so mindlessly bad when it comes to neutralizing a blitz. Like you look at that playoff game, so many plays that Hurts was running for his life. There isn't a hot read. There's not even a check down. Everybody's headed for the hills. And it's like, where is the logic? Like, how are we all seeing this on our couch week in and week out? It wasn't just a 1-game instance. Like, this was a problem all year. We were almost like driving ourselves nuts. It's like, how does everybody see this but them? They're the ones running this and running the film every single day.
Well, the first thing you have to do to recognize that you have a problem is admit they have a problem. And whatever it was, that lack of accountability, which I am, call it corny, whatever you want, but to hear Devin White say that him, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts have an accountability.
No, I liked hearing that. Yeah, Devin White's stepping up as a leader, by the way.
Every single player that's been talking, Lou, has mentioned that word, accountability. And it falls down to every single person. And there was a lack of it last year on Nick Sirianni, on the offensive coordinator and Brian Johnson. Now, this is Kellen Moore's offense. We know that. And Jalen Hurts, he's taking it in stride. And it seems that they have that accountability back, that they know, hey, if there are issues, we have to address them and quickly. And the best part about it is, Lou, this isn't like some big hiccup that they're coming into camp and the offense can't hit a pass. Like Josh Allen apparently went 3 interceptions on 4 plays in Buffalo Bills team practices. And we see Danny Dollars throwing just some absolute gems over there in New York. Jalen Hurts is not letting the ball hit the ground, which is exactly what you want to see in an offense, which there's going to be a lot of things that are based on timing, on understanding leverage of defenders, and that's not the easiest in year one. That's an offense that could take 8 weeks to really get into the rhythm of, into the regular season. But to hear that now, Lou, it just, in my eyes, it makes me realize that they knew, we have to take accountability for the lack of protection of our quarterback, because that's what it came down to. At the end of the day, what is not having a hot route for your QB? It's taking the entire onus and putting it on his shoulders and having to read the field quickly and knowing he's probably going to get roasted 9 times out of 10 by a blitzing edge defender, which he did at the end of the season. And it was unfortunate.
I will say, I think 2021 teams attacked Jalen Hurts in this Eagles offense with the blitz because I think Jalen sometimes didn't recognize things. He couldn't find the open field. He couldn't find the open space to hit his receivers, tight ends, running backs. But I don't think last year the blitz problems were a reflection of Jalen still not taking steps in that way, because in 2022, you saw him take that steps. One of the game-winning plays of a matchup in 2022 was against the Arizona Cardinals on 3rd down. They sent an all-out blitz. Jalen knew it was coming, found his hot route to Dallas Goedert over the middle, and they won the game. They put the game on ice from that. So I think last year was more so Jalen didn't have options against the blitz. Like, they asked him to be a hero, and he's mobile, he'll get away, and then boom, we've got shots down the field. But that was their antidote every single time to answer the blitz, and it never helped. And it's like, sure, I get the idea of maybe sending a couple guys deep against the blitz, because if Jalen does get away, there might be some space down there, right? But the middle of the field, it felt like there was so much space always, and there was no green hats.
It really felt like they got away from that almost. I think the easiest way to look at it is like that Doug Peterson way of building an offense, where you're always going to have that West Coast. We're going to have a flat. We're going to have something down low. We're going to have something intermediate.
Someone's always going to be in those
spots. We're going to have somebody deep. It felt like a lot of the time they were running like mirrored post routes where both receivers stacked on one side are running the same route and they're going to the same area. And it didn't seem like anybody was aware that there was a blitzer. And that's not just on the offensive coordinator. That's on the guys communicating at the line of scrimmage as well. But I think it ultimately comes down onto the guys game planning each and every week, because I think you put it best, Lou. People that use the quote unquote system quarterback discussion around Jalen Hurts, show me the system. There was a lack of a system.
The system was junk.
It was faulty. It was finding out that the foundation of the house, that is this multi-million-dollar mansion, was built on wood that was driftwood, and it was already rotted out from termites. Like, they didn't have the answers. The foundation was flawed, and you saw that at the end of the year, Lou, because once teams figured it out and that Jalen Hurts superhero type of character came back to earth, well, that's what happens. Defensive coordinators, they don't sleep. They don't see their families. They have one job. It's stop these elite quarterbacks. And teams figured out that way. And Todd Bowles like put the icing on top of the cake at the end of the year.
And yeah, he exposed the Eagles just over and over again, tried the same thing to fix the same problem, and it never worked. At least now, though, it does feel like they did recognize that, and you're seeing that through the first week of training camp practice, through pre-snap motion, through hot routes, through checking the ball down to your new elite receiving running back in Saquon Barkley. This offense looks brand new under Kellen Moore. So coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, Gino and I are going to do an exercise because right now we still don't know exactly what Kellen Moore is cooking up for this offense. We're going to try to drop our own Kellen Moore plays for this personnel. So we'll get into it coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and to bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, got to turn down the volume with all the shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Gino, some things we've been talking about pretty consistently over the last few weeks, like how a lot of the same offensive personnel is going to be used different in Kellen Moore's offense. Early in the week, we talked about like A.J. Brown, maybe being used more as the receiver he was in Tennessee, which was a guy that was more eating in the short and intermediate areas, right? Over the run after the catch ability, like crossers, slants, screens, like get him in space. Whereas with Philly, he's been very well-rounded. He's pretty much ate all over the field, but really his most damage has been deep down the field, right? Like vertical routes. We talked about in segment 1, how it just does not work against the blitz. The Eagles were pushing the ball down the field though, no matter what the personnel was, whatever the defense was doing. Devontae Smith, we talked about maybe him using the slot more to utilize Devontae's like elite route running ability. So Saquon Barkley being used differently than in New York. And I think most of that's going to have to do with pre-snap motion, but like where they line up, like what Jalen Hurts does with them, what parts of the field they go to, I really do think it's going to be very different. Dallas Goedert too. It sounds like Goedert is being used in far more ways than last year, where Brian Johnson, it's like he had no idea how to use his elite tight end.
It felt like somebody, okay, this is going to take you way back. Okay, as a kid, there were Legos, and then the next step up was like these connector sets almost.
Bionicles?
Not Bionicles, but like these connector sets that had like not just Lego pieces where you could put them together, but they like came with a little wrench and stuff. It almost felt like Brian Johnson was playing with this connector set, and he was a Lego kid all along. Like he didn't know what he was doing. He was way in over his ears. But now with Kellen Moore, this is what he does. This is the world he came from. Go back to his Boise tape when I used to watch those games when I was a kid, man. That Boise offense, that was what it was. Spread, move guys around. We're going to find space. And that's the world that you have to live in, because if you look at the best teams in college, they're running this cover 3 match where they base out of quarters a lot of the time. How do you beat zone defenses with that man element to it? A lot of crossers, like you're saying, those rub routes, finding space. Look at Travis Kelce. What does he do against zone? Go find a hole, go see where they're weak, and we're going to find you. And that's what Kellen Moore is going to bring to this team, where Brian Johnson, we have our plays. It doesn't matter if there are guys in those spots If it's cover 1, cover 3, cover 0, we're going to call the same play regardless. I think there's going to be so many checks and just so many different options in this Kellen Moore offense where, hey, if it is against man, we're going to have a different read. If it is against zone, we're going to have a different read. If it's cover 1, cover 3, we're going to have different reads for everything.
Exactly.
It's a lot on the QB. It's a lot on the wide receivers, but these guys are getting paid that money to where they have to go and show that. So that's how you beat teams, is not letting them get the upper hand and call out your plays like they were last year. Kellen Moore should be having some fun on the whiteboard like we might have here in a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gino, like what's a play you could envision that Kellen Moore is going to draw up for A.J. Brown's on the field, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley? Like, because everybody's saying, I mean, how many times have we said the words pre-snap motion, hot routes, versatility, like different areas of the field? But when it comes to like an actual play, like what is like a design that you could see Kellen Moore drawing up from his Dallas Cowboy days, Boise State, Los Angeles Chargers for this personnel?
Okay.
Like, let's get on the whiteboard here.
Formation.
Yes.
Quarterback's in the gun.
Okay.
Saquon's to our right. All right.
He's lined up in the slot?
No, he's not in the slot. He's right
he's
to the right of Jalen Hurts in the backfield. Okay.
All right. Yep.
We are going to the front side. So for a right-handed quarterback, that's the right side of the field, right? We're going to go Y off. So our tight end is going to be off in a trips formation with him, the third receiver, whoever that is, if it's Anaya Smith, Paris Campbell, lined up top. And then behind them in that trips bunch is going to be A.J. Brown.
Okay.
On the backside is going to be a lone wide receiver in Devontae Smith. So what we are going to do, we are going to run an orbit motion with A.J. Brown that's going to go around the quarterback. He's going to run this big motion, right? So what we are going to run from that, we are going to get him to the side of Devontae Smith. So now we're in a 2-by-2 set essentially, but we're going to call hike before he gets set. So what we're going to do, Devontae is going to run a clear out. So in a quarters defense, let's say we're going against quarters, the number 1 is responsible for anything up and out to the sideline. So we're going to put that guy into conflict. You are going to have Devontae Smith run a 9. He's going to run straight down the field. And right behind him is going to be A.J. Brown. He is going to put that boundary corner in conflict. They're going to put him in conflict, and they are going to read his leverage. So it's either going to be, we're going to have Devontae on the 9, and we're going to corner this thing out to the sideline. If the corner is playing inside leverage, if he's playing outside leverage, we're going to hit this thing on an in, sit in the space between the linebacker. Don't let the safety read that yet. We can kind of post this thing up to find that space. On the front side, Dallas Goedert is going to run a corner route. We're going to run a slight dagger with that Anaya Smith route. And then we're going to have an H option. Saquon Barkley is going to go up to the linebacker, read his leverage, and hopefully it's the opposite way of A.J. Brown. So now we have a 2-way read. We're reading A.J. Brown on this leverage. We can either get him out to the corner or get him in space, or we can get Saquon in this underneath area of that zone that hopefully those guys have vacated that area already. I know there was a lot.
Fire me up. No, I'm so pumped.
You can kind of envision it. We're going from trips to a 2-by-2, and then we're going to make that corner. Oh, I got to go with Devontae, but now I got A.J. Brown right behind him. I got to pass him off to the safety. So if the safety doesn't read Devontae, we could hit this thing deep on a backside 9, or we could just hit it underneath and get that first down. And
why were they not doing this?
This is what I'm saying. I'm a nobody. I'm a Joe Schmo. The highest level I've ever called was freshman, and we ran the wing team.
Don't sell yourself short. That was a great play design.
I think you'll see a lot of those options. That's the best thing you can do for these guys, is not just put them out. Allow them to use their smarts. Allow them to use their athleticism. How many times in basketball do you give it to the point guard, get the guy at the key? If he's going to take away your left hand, all right, we'll sell to the left, and we're going to go back to the right. All of a sudden, we have a wide open look. We're taking advantage of leverage. Things that basic understanding of sports will get you so far if you just know how to do that.
So I want to make a basketball analogy, since you already brought up the NBA. You look at, because again, like there is teams that can win because of talent. The Philadelphia Eagles did that 2 years ago. The Miami Heat honestly did that when they had LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. Even though those guys stylistically like didn't mesh, it wasn't this elaborate scheme. They won based on personnel. But the difference between some of those teams that underachieved despite having star power, right? You look at even like the older Thunder, that the post Durant Thunder that had, and stick with me for if you're not a basketball fan, but they had Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, but there was no creativity. They clearly had no plan for those three to mesh together. It was just, let's get all this talent in here and then they'll just figure out the rest. But then you look at why Golden State was so good. Like, yes, obviously they had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, but there was a method to that madness. They all blended in so perfectly in Steve Kerr's offense where they were all moving constantly. There were play designs. Like what you just did is only going to amplify and elevate the talent that you have. Again, 100%. Look at San Francisco. We said it before, but San Francisco, Miami, those teams could win just with talent. They could get by without Mike McDaniels and Kyle Shanahan's offenses. But why are they so elite every single year in every statistical category? It's because that part of it takes it to another level.
And the thing is to not do that. You're not fulfilling the requirements of the job description.
Yeah,
you should know every man beater, every zone beater, how I'm going to beat every single coverage. And it felt like the Eagles had no idea how to do any of that.
Yeah,
I completely
and
we're not
agree.
just talking out of our rear end. Go look at the tape. Go, anybody who turns that tape on, you know exactly what
Nick Sirianni himself admitted that the offense was stale at the end of the year.
Yes.
So your own headmaster of the offense said it was as
guru
vanilla as is just Perry's vanilla ice cream. I don't think that's Turkey Hill, maybe for
I
our
don't know
listeners.
if Philly has.
I'm from New York, so
that's a Western
Turkey
New York
Hill,
thing.
I would say. But yeah, great play design. Give me that in the regular season. I'm ready.
But you see what I'm saying though? Like,
yeah, I can see it.
Allow AJ Brown to kind of like work in space, and that's going to be the give and take too. There's going to be plays when AJ's that clear route, and then we can let Devon. I almost hit you with the let's motion Devontae into the backfield, fake the handoff to Saquon. And then we're just going to run two Texas routes. Each of these guys reads the leverage, and we have fun.
I could just see
way.
it like Saquon's in the slot. Devontae calls in motion to the backfield. Saquon gets called in motion over Jalen Hurts.
You want to play with the connector set, right? Like you don't want the 3-year-old Legos. Yeah. Like we want to have fun with this thing.
Saquon goes in front of Hurts. It's a read option play. Hurts pulls. Saquon's doing a wheel route on the right sideline. Devontae breaks left. There is just so many.
How many triple option where it's like a RPO where we motion the guy? That's our pitch man. And then we have the toss. Like there's so many different things you can implement that way.
So in preparation for this podcast, I watched because for some reason it stood out. And for the reason is they never did this again. The first game they lost of the season last year against New York, they actually did something really creative where DeAndre Swift was lined up on the right side on an island by himself as the only wideout. AJ Brown was in a bunch set, even like kind of what you were alluding to, where he did a total wide orbit like motion behind Jalen Hurts. They faked the screen to him, faked the handoff to Swift, who came in motion into the backfield. Boston Scott was also back there. Jalen like almost faked a draw, and it looked complicated, but then Boston Scott's wide open on the left side. He picked up 20 yards. You could see the Jets, like everybody scrambling, like their eyes are just moving everywhere. It's so beneficial, and they didn't really do that again after that one play.
Somebody tweeted arguably the dumbest thing ever that was like the triple option has no place in the modern offense. And it's like every modern offense is
Carolina Panthers made a Super Bowl off the triple option.
But look at the new ways of the triple option. Like I'm saying, Lou, it's this RPO world where
I was going to say, it's not as basic as just triple
our
option.
read is maybe a wide receiver where we can kind of get him out on a little, you could get him on a screen and that could be your read, right? Like if you have a light box, we're going to hand it off to the wide receiver. If we got light on the outside, we're going to throw it to the wide receiver. And that's just a different way of the triple option. And the Eagles limited themselves to one option last year. And if that option didn't work, it was superhero Jalen Hurts. You don't need to make him be a superhero when his regular powers are good enough to get you to where you want to be.
Completely agree. All right, let's wrap up this edition of Locked On Eagles. Switching sides, we've got a question, Fan Friday, from one of our Locked On Eagles listeners about the defensive line, which we got into yesterday. We'll get into that question coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
We finish up LOE. We are thankful for LinkedIn for sponsoring this episode of LOE. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role, like Kellen Moore being the OC for the Eagles. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has a tool to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who are actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users Don't even visit any other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn right now. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your jobs for free. We thank LinkedIn for sponsoring this episode of LOE. Terms and conditions do apply.
All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast the way we always do. Fan Friday, hearing from some of our Locked On Eagles listeners. And today we go to Anthony Rakutia on Twitter, who writes in, heard the podcast yesterday, had a lot of the same thoughts about the Eagles defensive line. I was referring to Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, even Jordan Davis, Milton Williams. Like, all of these guys have shown flashes. They have not really been full-time players. The Eagles are banking on a lower floor unit this year than they're normally used to. Anthony writes in, of those players specifically on the edge, what's your guys' confident level in one of them? Who would be that guy to step up and be the most reliable every down player on the edge? Gino, I'm curious. I don't know if we have the same guy. I think just based on what I've seen, if it's based on projection, I'd say Bryce Huff. But if like gun to my head right now, especially after hearing Fangio's comments about Huff, and because Nolan Smith, I still have not seen it. Like he's in year 2. I think Josh Sweat at least has shown at times like he can be that guy against the run as a pass rusher, an elite pass rusher, an every down player. Like, I would still lean Josh Sweat, but eventually I wouldn't be surprised if that is Huff or Smith.
The thing with Huff, and I think he made a good point in his press conference the other day, that he was kind of a third down pass rusher.
Yeah.
Not because of choice, because there were really good players ahead of him. The Jets, that was the one area where they were very deep, and he wasn't able to play against the run. Now, if you go back to Nolan Smith, the more recent memory was him kind of getting dogged off the line for a majority of probably 75% of the season. And then the team tried to get him in there towards the end, and he started to look better against the run. Well, coming from the SEC, you're taking on guys way bigger than you. You're taking on power runs. You're taking on every type of block. He's seen it, and more recently than Bryce Huff. So I get what you are saying in that regard. Bryce Huff should be given every opportunity, though. Like, if he looks bad against the run, then we can address it. Like, then we have a major problem. But the only way you're going to figure that out is to put him out there. Like, we're not going to see it until week 1. Like, can this guy? I mean, the same thing with Hassan Reddick, though, Lou. Like, he was a 3-down player for a lot of the time in Arizona, in Carolina, but he was a pass rush specialist. He wasn't the front side edge defender that's taking on double.
No, I agree.
That's not his job.
Yeah, and again, we want Bryce Huff's. His main reason for being in Philadelphia is to go get the quarterback. Same with Hassan Reddick.
The QB.
Yeah. But you are paying him $17 million to play more than just like obvious pass rushing situations, right? Like obvious passing downs. Nolan Smith, actually, I didn't say this on the podcast yesterday, but you just made a great point. Like, this guy did play in the SEC, a lot of great offensive lines, a lot of team run the football. Pro Football Focus, actually, Nolan Smith heading into the draft had the highest graded, the highest run stopping grade of any of the edge rushers in the first round. So it's not like Nolan Smith, his entire football career, collegiate or pro, has been useless against the run. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Huff or Smith eventually, but those guys, it's more of a much more of a projection than I think it is for Josh Sweat.
Well, Josh Sweat, he made his money in the beginning being a very good edge or a run defender.
Absolutely.
Rather. And then he kind of developed his arsenal and his tools to be the
sacks didn't come until like 2020.
And the thing about him is you could kind of probably line those guys both up on the same side of the ball a lot of the times, right? Let's line Josh Sweat up as like a 4 tech directly over the
Nolan
tackle.
Smith's the overhang. And
yes, Nolan Smith's an overhang, and we can get Bryce Huff to be like a wide 7, a wide 9 and take advantage while Josh occupies 2 of those guys. There's going to be many different looks for them. And the one thing you want to avoid, though, is getting in those situations where you're slanting Bryce Huff inside, and then all of a sudden they do pull the ball and run, and then he's on a guard and a center, and now he's got to get off of this combo block. Like, let's try to avoid that at all costs. Right. But if you're going to give him a one-on-one and he could use his speed to get a 2-way go off of this guy and use his fast hands to swipe and rip and to get underneath, why can't he use those tools to be a very good run defender, and they paid him as such. And at the same time, Lou, they're not paying him as crazy money as some of these edges are going to get because they still have that projection element to them.
That is a good point. 17 million a year. Like they did invest a good amount in him.
It's a lot of money,
but you're right. It's compared to what they would have given Hassan or any other top tier edge rusher.
Hassan's not a camp because he wants 20 some odd million a year.
Yeah, the Jets, he's holding out. They just placed him on the some reserve list, I believe.
Oh, goodness, man. Howie was right. Anybody who had doubts on that one, I think.
He has every right to hold out, but the Jets should have known he wasn't going to take it. If he was going to take
he signs the contract before he gets on the plane.
If he was going to take less than the max, he'd still be an Eagle. Like, how did the Jets not know? Joe Douglas's boys with Howie too. How did you not talk to him before this? It's unbelievable.
It's like what the Mavericks did. They trade for Klay Thompson, or did they just sign him?
They signed him in free agency.
Yeah, but let's say Klay Thompson was like a sign and trade. It's like you're not sending Klay Thompson to Dallas without him having a contract in hand by the time he gets to the airport in Golden State, right? Like that's the thing with Hassan Reddick. Like you should have had that already in the bag. And Howie, another testament to him, he doesn't back himself into a corner. And this Bryce Huff thing, like every day, it's just getting better and better, right? Because even at the edge position, well, we have optionality. Like we'll see if one of these guys can be the guy. Like
at least if they're not banking on one projection. They've got a bunch of them. So law of average, like one will at least be the guy.
When it comes to the defensive line, it's like two of those Georgia guys are going to work out just because of the law of averages, like you said.
Agree.
Like 66% of those guys are going to work out. We'll see who it is. Is Nolan going to be that every down guy with that muscle he packed on, man? Like he
looks bigger.
He knows that job is coming, that he could be that front side edge defender. And optionality. I love what Vic Fangio said, that he's going to give these guys as many reps as possible at many different places and kind of dial it back from there. And that's what camp's all about. And this offseason, Lou, like, there's some teams around the league that they don't have this type of fun, like leading into camp. Talk about a team that they were just on the top of the world 2 years ago, and you're like, how much can it really change? This thing is brand new. It's a brand new team that we're going to see.
We're used to that, so that's no surprise at all. Camp starts up again next Monday. Got practice, of course, updates for you all throughout the week right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off for now. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.